In today's session, we are going to discuss about how to handle the exceptions in Workday. In other programming languages, .NET or Java, we usually call them as exception handling. In Workday, we use the term error handling. When you are building the integrations, you have to handle the exceptions. Okay, so otherwise, if you don't handle the exception, if any exception or error occurred during the runtime, the integration will be failed. If you don't handle the exception, if guys, I'm sorry, if I use the error or exception, they both are same. Okay, so if you don't handle those errors when you are running the integration, if you don't have any exception handling, and if any error occurs, the integration will be failed and it will throw that error message. The integration will contain very long error message which an end user cannot understand. The general practice is we don't leave or we don't build the integrations like that, so we always handle the exceptions. Okay, example, you are building an inbound integration, a studio integration, where you have to read a file from the external location, and then you have to read that file into the integration and then process that input file. Okay, assume that there is no input file in the mentioned external location. Then what happens? You are expecting an inbound file, and you are reading that inbound file in your trying to read that inbound file in your integration, but the file is not available. Or you are receiving an input file which contains the worker termination details, employee id, termination date, first name, sorry, employee id, termination date, primary termination reason, secondary termination reason. You are receiving an input file with these details, and all these values are mandatory to terminate a worker, but one record in that file doesn't have the employee id. Without employee id, you cannot terminate the worker. Then what happens? Again, integration will fail and it will throw a long error message. And what do you want to do in such cases? What do you want to do if the file is not available? What do you want to do if one of the record in that file is not available? One of the record is not available means if it contains the any invalid data. Can you tell me what do you want to do at that time if the file is entire input file is not available? How do you handle that situation? And one record in that file has invalid data. How can you handle these situations?
What was the question again, Raj?
Okay, so we are building an integration. Okay, an integration has to read a file from the external location, and during the runtime we encounter two issues. Issue one is the inbound file is not available. So how do you handle that situation? What do you want to do if the input file is not available? Do you want to terminate the integration, or you want to continue the integration by writing the error message saying inbound file is not available?
Yeah, write the error message. Inbound file is not available.
And do you want to continue the integration?
No.
Hmm. Because if the input file is not available, there is no meaning in executing the remaining integration, right? So if in such cases, if the input file is not available, then the general approach is, one second. So the general approach is we write that error message. Instead of letting the integration throw an exception or error, we handle that, we catch that exception, we write an validation, and we will check if the file is available or not. If the file is not available, then you will write an error message saying inbound file is not available, please verify, and you will stop the integration execution. Okay, that's how we can handle. Take the another situation. The input file is there, it contains the record. Okay, it contains 10 records. Out of those 10 records, one record has invalid data or missing data. Then how do you handle that? Do you stop the integration run just by writing the error message, say this particular record has invalid data? Do you stop the integration execution when one of the record has invalid data, or
No, you just continue to run and then write a message that this record failed.
right? So when the input file is there, and if one of the record is has missing or invalid data, then general practice is don't terminate the integration. Instead, write the error message. Okay, like, okay, this particular row has invalid data, or this row has missing employee ID, missing termination date. Write an error message to that particular record and continue the execution. That is the general approach to handle such situations. And if you don't have the exception handling, and in these cases what happens is integration will throw an error saying, hey, there is an issue at that particular location or component, and it will terminate the integration. In first case, somehow okay, when the input file is not available, if the integration is terminated by throwing the exception, that's fine. But if you take this second scenario, though one record has the invalid data, and if you don't have the exception handling or error handling, the integration execution will be stopped, throwing the error message. Just because of one worker, okay, we could not able to process the other records. That too, when it throw the error message, it will write an all the error log details to the integration message. The end user may or may not be able to understand that error message. The general practice is whenever there is an exception or means error, the general practice is we write a meaningful message in the integration event saying input file is not available, this worker record has missing data. Okay, we write a meaningful error message which can be understood by the end user, and we will write the what is that error log message or this complete exception details inside the log file, so that during the debugging, okay, by seeing the error message, if you are the developer, if you want to debug, you will go to the log file and you will see the exception or error message and you will debug the failure. So now based on this, we understand error handling is required in the studio integration. But how can we do that? So to handle the exceptions, we have two components. One is send error and another one is log error. Send error and log error. So this log error component, what this will do is whenever there is an exception, let's say the input file is missing, but you're trying to read that input file value into a variable. So then integration will generate an error. And if you use the log error component, this log error component will catch that exception. Whenever integration throw an exception, this component will catch that exception and writes that error message, that exception or error message to the integration log file. By default, this causes the error to be logged to the server log file. You will simply catch that exception and log that error message to the integration server log. So that's how it will handle the exception. But the problem is, it will simply add that error message to the server log. But my requirement is, see, I have to check when integration is trying to read an input file. If the file is not available, then I want to terminate the integration. But while terminating or stopping the integration execution, I want to write a meaningful message, error message to the integration event. If I write that error message to the server log, how an end user will understand? How an end user will understand? It will simply log to the server log and integration will be completed successfully. You have to consider that. It will simply handle and write it to the log message, but it will not change the integration status. The reason is, as it is sending or writing that error or exception message to the log file, there won't be any change in the integration event. It is not writing any error message to the integration event. That's so though there is an exception, integration will be completed successfully. But my requirement is, I want to stop or terminate the integration execution whenever there is an exception. Whenever there is an exception, I want to terminate the integration run, and at the same time I want to write an error message to my integration event. For that, we use send error. If you use this send error component, what it will do is, whenever there is an exception, it will catch that exception. And it allow you, or it will help you to execute another set of statements. It doesn't write the error message to the log file. Instead, it allow you to execute your own code. So as it is allowing me to execute some other code, what I will do is, whenever there is an exception, send error will catch that and it will allow me to do that. And in those steps, the code which it is allowing me to execute when there is an exception, there I will write the code which add an error message to the integration event. I will write an error message or warning message saying, hey, input file is not available, or this particular record has the missing data. We're going to see practically, but just remember these two. Log error message, it will simply add the error message to the log file, server log file, and it will not change the integration status based on this error. And send error message, it allow you to execute some set of code when there is an exception. And the general practice is the code which we execute when there is an exception. In that code, we write the code which will write an error message to the integration event. Okay, and one second. Yes. So in Workday integration, we have two error handlers. One is, you can in simple, local error handler and global error handler. How we have local exception handling, global exception handling. So here we have local error handler and global error handler. Local error handler we refer as mediation error handlers. Okay, mediation error handler or local error handler. Another one is global error handler. Okay, see, there are two places where error handlers can be placed in the assembly. Now we are talking about send error or log error, right? These components can be placed at two places. One is mediation, async mediation component or sync mediation component. You can place these error handler, log error or send error, to the mediation components. Okay, or another one is global error handler, where you will place directly inside the assembly diagram. Let's see how it would be. So guys, to support our discussion, our exception handling, and followed by web service example, I have created some sample code. We are going to use this for our exception handling and web services discussion. So let me quickly walk through this. So the example name, integration name is AUG underscore web service example. This is a workday in component, and what I have done is I have declared a retrieval service inside this. I have declared retrieval service so that integration can read an inbound file. See this one, and after that, so here what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to read that input file content into a variable. See, document accessor dot to where, this is the input file name. I'm trying to read this file content into this variable. After that, I'm trying to transform that file content into an XML. See, I have used the csv2.xml, and here I have mentioned the root name, row name, and individual column names. I want to transform that input document into XML, and after that I'm using the splitter to split the each worker record, and after splitting the records into individual worker records, I want to read that worker details and I want to terminate that worker. That is my requirement. Read an input file which contains the termination details. One second, let me open the input file. This is the inbound file. See here, it contains employee ID, termination date, primary termination reason, and secondary termination reason. It contains these details. See here, employee ID, termination date, and primary termination reason and secondary termination reason. These two are the valid records, and for the exception handling discussion, I have added a few other records which has the missing data. We see here employee ID is missing, and if you see here secondary termination reason is missing, and here also, and if in this both termination date and secondary termination reason are missing. So these three records, 1 2 3 4, see these four records we use in the exception handling, and this first record and second record which has valid data, later in our next session we are going to discuss about web service example. At that time these two records will be processed, and for other records integration will throw an error message. Okay, this is the termination data file, and in our integration we are transforming that into XML, and we are splitting that XML into individual termination record For each termination record, here we are reading the, see, we are reading the termination data record details. It contains employee ID, termination date, primary termination reason, secondary termination reason. See, forget about these lines. Okay, just check these 4 lines. After splitting the XML into individual records, I am reading the data of that particular record, and later these details will be sent to the web service call. Employee ID, termination date, primary termination reason, secondary termination reason, these 4 properties will be sent to the terminate employee web service, and worker with these details will be terminated. After terminating the initial worker, go to the next record, get that worker details, and then terminate. Go to third record, get those details, and terminate. And while reading this data, okay, let's say after splitting, integration is reading the first record. Okay, here we have the first record details. These will be, if these details are proper, these will be sent to the termination web service. If not proper, let's say employee is missing or some other termination date is missing, then it will create an error message. So how it is creating and how to add the additional code, we are going to discuss. Okay, but this is the overview. We are receiving an input file and we are reading that file and then transforming that into XML and split that XML record by record and read the data from the each record and send those details to the terminate employee web service. Terminate employee web service, so that that particular worker will be terminated. As we have to read the inbound file, I have added a retrieval service. This will be configured. And next, I'm trying to read a file. See, here I'm trying to read the file with name termination data.csv, and I'm reading into the variable with the name input file. Okay, so if you see here, if you see this one, what happens if there is no input file with the name termination data.csv? What happens if there is no file, or if the integration is not retrieved any file with the name termination data.csv? What happens? So far we didn't add any exception handlers. So what is the expectation? I'm logging into the tenant. Let me open our integration. Let me try to run the integration. So it is asking us to attach an input document. So I'm going to attach that document. One second. See, I have attached this document. I just browsed in my local PC and I have attached this one. And while attaching, see, this is the file name. The attachment file name is this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to change this one. Let's say we are not receiving a file with the name termination data. Okay, so we are receiving the file with this name. Let me click on completed. I have launched the integration, then I have attached the file because we have the retrieval service which expect the file to be attached while launching the integration. So we have done that, and the integration is running. Can you see? Integration complete with the errors, and you see the error message. See, integration failed, so and so eval step. See, da dot termination data dot csv input dot file failed to evaluate, reason unable to resolve the property. See, we didn't receive the input file with the expected name, so it failed. Integration completed with errors, and you can see it completed with errors, and this is the error message. The end user may or may not be able to understand this error message. Let's say one of the SME or HR partner, they run this integration, okay, to generate few workers, and by seeing this, they may or may not be able to understand what went wrong. Okay, that's why we handle the exception. Let me add an exception here. Okay, when the file is not proper, or when the file we didn't receive the file with the expected name, it is throwing the error. Okay, and this is the mediation step. This is the mediation component where the exception is thrown. And if I want to handle the exception, if I want to handle the exception or error thrown by this component, you can add the error handlers here. You can add the error handlers, either log error or send error, to this component. So here, once you select, here you can see create custom error handler, log error or send error. So you can add either log error or send error here. Let me add log error. See, this is how you can add the error handlers to the integration. Currently, we are adding an log error component to this async mediation. So what it will do is, this log error component will handle all the exceptions that are thrown by this async mediation. So if this component, or if any component which is part of this async mediation, if they throw any exception, that will be handled by this component. And what it will do, it will simply log the error message. See, and if you see here, we have the message builder, and it is just going to write the message content, nothing but mediation message which contains the error information. Let me do this, and I'm going to redeploy the studio integration. After deploying the integration, open the integration in the Workday app browser, and configure the retrieval service. As whenever you deploy or redeploy the integration, always go to the integration, open the integration in the Workday application or browser, and check is there any errors. If, try to resolve those. Okay, I'm going to configure the document retrieval service. I want to attach the inbound file while launching the integration, and people who belongs to integration administration group, they can attach the inbound file. Okay, who belong to the integration administrator group, they can attach the file while launching the integration. Yes, we have configured the retrieval service. Now let me run the integration again. Attach the document, attach this termination data. Okay, and whatever the file you have attached, it is used by this integration event. See, completed the warnings. You see here, sorry guys, the thing is I should have added the file with a different name. I forgot that. Then we can see how the integration is responding. Attach document and attach termination data, but I'm using a different name here. Completed. Go to integration event. See, you see here integration is completed successfully. Though the input file is not there with the given expected name, the integration is completed successfully. And the end user may think, okay, the termination is successful, because this integration process the terminations, and when the status is completed, they may think the integration is completed successfully and all those workers are terminated. Though we have used the error handler, it's not helping us here, because the log error is simply add the message to the server log. If you go to the server log, you can view that data. Somewhere here you can see. If you open in the notepad plus plus, you can see it better. Okay, but let me see. Unable to resolve property data to where. Can you see this? But this is not what I want. What I want is, if there is no input file with the expected name, I want to integration to throw an error, and the integration should be fail. Okay, my expectation is, if there is no input file with the given name, the integration should be fail, and there should be an error message in the integration event. So for that, I'm not going to use the log error. Instead, I'm going to use the send error. I'm going to use the send error, and this will allow you to execute another set of steps. So here you can write some code and you can link that code to the send error. So what I want to do, if any exception or error occurred in reading the file, what I want to do. So that first you should have the idea on that. What do you want to do if exception occurred? The general practice is, when there is an exception, the general practice is we write an integration message. We write a message to the integration event here. So far we are depending on the messages that are generated by Workday. So now what you can do is, whenever there is an exception, you can write an error message. You can write an error message to the integration event. Okay, so go here and try to write an integration message. And how I can write the integration message? There is a component called put integration message. See, in common components, there is a component called put integration message. As the name indicates, put integration message, this can be used to write an integration message. And when you drag here, it has some property. This component has some property and it is displaying that. And few properties are mandatory, so that's why they have selected by default, and click on finish. So this component can write an integration message to the integration event. Okay, so whenever there is an exception, I want to send that details to this component, send error. So how it works is, whenever there is an error while executing or evaluating this expression, immediately it will throw an integration, will throw an error, and that error will be catched by this send error component, and later it will send the control to this component. Okay, it will send the control to this component. In this component we write the error message. See, if you go to the properties, see here you will set the message severity. Currently we have information message. So what message you are going to write? Are you going to write the information message or warning message or error message? So you have to mention that. Here we have different error messages. Okay, so I want to write an error message. Just copy this, and in the message severity type this one. So if I do this, this component will write an error message to the integration event. And message summary. So what do you want to do? So just mention that error occurred while trying to read the input file. Error occurred while trying to read the input file. So this is going to be the error message. And see, you can ignore this one. Okay, as of now, keep as it is. You don't have to change. Okay, so this is a severity summary, and we generally use another property called details. If you want to add that property, simply click on this, add another parameter, so message detail. Okay, select this one. In the details, what you will do is, you will mention those error message. See, whatever the error occurred, you will mention that error message information inside this details. See here, if you go here, if we take this message, see, this is a message severity and this is a message summary. If you click on this one, then it will display the message details. See, here it will display the message details. I want to write severity and summary, and along with that I want to display the details of this message also. That's why here we are adding the severity, and in this summary we are just adding error occurred while trying to read the input file, and in the details here you will write the actual error message. So now how can I get that error details here? Here exception, integration throw an exception that is catched by the sender component, and the control is sent to this put integration message. And here, how can I get that error details? If you want to get that latest error message or error information, processes, see, context, we have an ml variable called context dot, you can exception or error message or error code. You can get the individual information. Do you want to get error message or error code or error component id, in which component the error occurred, or you want to get the entire error? Okay, so you can use this one. If you use this one, it will write all the error details. And what happens is, after this, we are not giving the control to another component. So what happens is, whenever there is an exception, that will be catched by the send error component, and it allowing us to send the control to another component. In put integration, we are adding an error message, and after this we are not executing any code. So what happens is, the integration execution will be terminated. Okay, let's try for that. I'm going to redeploy this to the integration. After redeploying, go to the studio integration and configure the retrieval service again. Integration administrator, click on OK. Now go to the integration and launch the integration. So I'm changing the file name to some, and let me click on completed. And yes, here you can see the overall process. It is completed with errors. Now go to the message. Okay, and if you see the error message, I think I have to write vice versa. Integration summary is this one, so I think I have to write the vice versa details here. So, but if you see here, this time it is completed with the error, and if I write the error message properly here, where it is, then you will see the meaningful error message. Summary, error occurred. Is it same? I'm not sure. Yes, do you have any other property? One second. Okay. Again, if I redeploy this to the integration and if I run this integration, then I will see a meaningful message saying that the integration, what is that, inbound file is missing. So instead of seeing all these error messages, exception messages, you will see the message which can be understood by the end user. Earlier there was only one message You see, there was only one message. Now we are able to add the integration message to the error message to the integration event. Okay, and that means we are able to handle the exception. With the help of the send error, we are able to catch the exception, and we are handling that by writing the error message. Now, see, with the help of this, we can handle the error. We can handle the error where there is no input file, and there is no input file. Okay, assume take a case. The input file is present, but data is empty. File content is empty. Then in this case, if we take this one, this component, this async mediation component will throw the error when there is no input file with this name. It will throw the error when there is no input file with this name. It will not throw an error where the input file is empty. It will not throw any error if the input file is empty. But for me, the integration should fail, or it should be complete with the errors when the input file content is empty, because I cannot process an empty file. What I want to do is I want to raise an exception when the input file is empty, so that end user will understand, okay, so the input file is empty. Let's see, what is it really, is it expected behavior or is it empty by mistake. But as I mentioned, integration will not throw any error if the file content is empty in this component. You're just trying to read, and there is a file with this name. Yes, it will not throw any error. Then it will copy into the variable, and here we are trying to copy that variable content to mediation message, and here we are trying to transform that file content into XML. We are trying to transform that file content into XML. So then what happens? Then what happens? Yes, any guess? It may throw an error saying that it cannot transform into empty message into XML, or even trying to process an empty file is meaningless. So what I want to do is, instead of going and means allowing the integration to going to the further components, I want to handle that exception also here. Integration is throwing the error. It is by default, it's throwing the error if the input file is not available. But now I want to throw in custom error. If the file content is empty, I want to throw an error. If the employee ID in the input file is empty, I want to throw an error. If the termination date in the input file is empty, I want to throw an error. So how can we throw an error? Okay, for that we have few validation components. My requirement is I want to throw an error when the file is empty. So to perform that, we have some validation components. We have some validation component. In that, we have some component called validate expression. Validate expression. What this will do is, this validate expression, this component will throw the error. It allow you to throw the error. Okay, inside this validation, sorry guys, 1 second, let me maximize this. Okay, let's use this one. Yes. So what this component will do is, this component allow you to write some expressions. Here you can write some expression, and what this will do is it will throw an exception if any of this expression is false. Here we will write true or false evaluate expressions. If any one of this expression returns false, then integration will throw an error. Integration will throw an error. So let's see how we can use this. What I want to do is, instead of this, okay, so before this I want to write an expression. So da dot size. See, what this will do is it will return the number of retrieved documents. I will write a condition like this: da dot size, okay, less than 1. Da dot size less than 1. Then I want to throw an error, because that means there is no input file. Document accessor dot size, this function, what it will do is it will return the number of retrieved documents, the number of documents retrieved by the integration. So if the count is less than 1, then I want to write an error message saying that no inbound files, input files are received. No input files are received. If da dot size greater than 1. If you receive more than one file also, again integration cannot process more than one file. So then I want to write an error message: more than one input file is received, integration cannot process multiple files. I want to write this error message. Okay, so da dot size less than or equal to 1, greater than or equal to 1, and the next one is da dot, I want to read that information into a variable. I will write it if the file is empty. So I will write this expression here. So what this will do is it will try to read this file content into this variable, and what I want to do is I want to check if the length of the file is less than 0, less than or equal to 0. Then I want to write another error message: empty file is received, integration cannot process empty file. We will write the error message. So what happens is, first it will check da dot size less than or less than 1. If yes, then it will throw in this error message: no input files are received. And then it will receive, it cannot process multiple files, or it will receive the empty file is received. This, using with the help of this evaluate expression, you can write the expressions. If any one of this expression returns false, then it will throw an error. And how this component will work is, see, first it will check this condition. If the condition is false, then it will throw an error exception. If the condition is true, then it will verify the next condition, next prop expression. If the expression is false, it will throw an error. If the expression is true, then it will come to the next expression. So take our example. What we are doing when we are running the integration, we are attaching an input file. First it will come here. Okay, so it will check da dot size less than 1, true or false. How many files we are attaching? One file. So what it will check is, it will check da dot size less than 1. So this expression will returns true or false.
False.
Then what happens?
We move to the next.
If this is false, then it will throw an exception.
If the condition is false, means it's not less than 1, right?
Right, it's not less than 1, but here if you see this one, what is the expression? Da dot size less than 1. Okay, what it will return? We are attaching a file, so then da dot size will equal to 1, and which condition we have here?
Get you. Can you please repeat it?
Sorry?
Can you please repeat the question?
Okay, see how this evaluate expression works is, first it will check the first expression. If the expression returns true, then it will continue the execution, means it will go to the next expression, and it will check if the second expression is true or false. If it returns true, then it will go to the next expression. If it returns false,
I'm sorry to interrupt you. If the expression is true, like let's take the first expression, the size is less than 1. That means we have 0 file. 0 files received, right? So then that's when we should get the error message, right?
Generally we expect like that. Okay, so as you said, generally we expect, okay, this expression will fail when there is no input file. But think in another way. Okay, what is the size of this da dot size? What is the value? How many files we are attaching?
1.
1. Okay, now 1 less than 1, is it true or false?
False.
So then it will throw an error message. So we have to consider this in evaluate expression component. Okay, so that's why I was saying how it behaves is, first it will check the first expression. If the result of the first expression is true, then only it will come to the next expression. So here, though we writing the expression to handle the exception, it is causing the exception. Input file is there, but the condition expression which we write, it return false and it is throwing the exception. So generally we write like this, that you have to consider this one. Now, so can you read this one? Now what happens?
File length of the file is.
Okay, take case 1. Okay, so assume that we are now we didn't receive the file with this name, termination data.csv. Then what happens?
It should return a message, an error message.
So it will return an error message, and the error message will say empty file is received, right? Empty file is received and integration cannot process the empty file. And if the document size less than 1, okay, let's say there is a file, and so it read this file and then it will come here. Yeah, one second guys, I will be on mute for a minute. 1 second. One second, Kiran is asking for one document. Please give me a minute. I'm pausing the recording temporarily. Yes. Hey, sorry. Uh, can you see my screen now?
Please, Raj.
Okay. So that's why what we do is generally we write the expressions in reverse order. Okay. See, first of all, it allow you to write set of expression, and if any one of this expression returns false, it will throw an exception. Okay, when we have this one da dot size less than 1, actually when the input file is available, it is returning value 1, and 1 less than 1 it will return false, and though the input file is received, it will throw an error message. Okay, so the general practice is that's why we, we write the expressions in reverse order. You can write like this. You can, instead of even doing this one, okay, so you can write an expression da dot size, so less than 1. Then what you will is you will write it ternary conditions. Okay, if it is less than 1, then integration will become this expression false, else true. You will write like this. Okay, now what happens? It will check this condition da dot size. It will return that value. It is value 1, and 1 less than 1. Then it will return false, or it will return true. So like this, if I use this one, what happens again? If I use this, what happens?
Raj, for some reason I'm really confused. Like when it is
Haha,
false,
right. Go ahead.
when the condition is false,
Mhm.
it will. But
Okay,
what?
so let me add this one. Let me quickly add one more step. I will show you. It's okay. 1 second. So what I'm going to do is, after the workday in, I'm adding another component, and here I will write this condition. 1 second. Show properties view. I'm writing an expression this. So here in this mediation component, what I'm going to do is I'm going to read the input file. Okay, so okay, and I'm reading the input file and I'm placing it in a variable called input file. If assume that there is no file with the given name, then it will throw an error. So to handle that, I'm adding a put integration message here. Click on finish, and here if there is no file, then I want to throw an error. And here summary and all those, what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw an exception what we are receiving. So context got error message. Let me use this, whatever the error message it sends, or I want to use input file is not received, and here also I want to use the same. Okay, so this one, and when there is an exception, I want to add this error handler and send the control to this. So what this will do is, if there is any exception while reading the input file, that will be handled by this put integration message. And assume that there is no error while reading the file. We are able to read that file into the variable. Then it will come here. And here we are doing the additional validations. Okay, so if we go to this, I don't have to read this. Okay, let me remove this one. Now the validations that I want to do is, so if the file is empty, so even you don't need all this, let me remove all these, okay, as it is causing additional confusion. If the file is empty, sorry, if the file is not received, then it will be handled here. If we receive more than one file, then integration will ignore the additional file. It will just read the file with the given name. Now we are here. When we reach this one, that means the file is available with the name termination data. Now we have to add a validation here saying if the file content is empty or not. So for that I'm adding a condition. Okay, so how we can get is the var, and in which variable we have saved that file content, input file. This is the variable name. So, and there is a method called text. Yes, text dot length. There is a method called length. Let me get this one, guys. We have another document which has the validations. This one, control. Where is our input file? Okay, so now we are writing this expression. Okay, here I'm writing this error message. Input file is empty. Now let's try to understand. So we are reading input file. If the file is not there, then it will throw an error message saying inbound file is, the input file is not received. And here, okay, assume that the input file is received, then it will come here. Can you tell me what will be the result of this expression, true or false? We are trying to read the input file, that variable text, and we are getting the length. So if the file is empty, then what happens? What will be the length if the file is empty?
0.
0. And 0 greater than 0, true or false?
False.
False. Then it will throw this error message, input file is empty. Okay, take the another case. Okay, the file is not empty, then
No, it's like some characters, like 4 or 5.
4 or 5 characters. Then 4 greater than 0, true or false?
True.
True.
And it will not happen.
So
Okay.
as it is true, then it will go to the next stage.
The best, yeah, did not get. What are those true or false, like a replace?
See, if you take this one, okay, if in this example what they are doing is they are trying to do the same. See, not only this integration, most of the integration we try to do this same. Okay, so here they are reading this file into the variable, and the first step they are trying to read a file with the given name into this variable. Okay, so what happens if there is no file with the given name? It will throw an error and it will write an error message. And if you see the error message, they are simply adding the context.error message. They are not handling, they are not writing the specific error message. That's why in our example we have splitted these two. So if you see this one here, we have just step which try to read the input file. If the file is, if this expression is fails, that means there is no input file with the given name, or some exception occurred while trying to read the input file. That's why I have added a separate put integration message which writes that input file is not received, or exception occurred, error occurred while reading the input file. I'm writing this message. Next, after reading the file, okay, let's say everything is fine, the file is received with the given name, then it will come here. And here the only check that I have to do is if the file is empty or not. This is how we can do. If we take this example, here what they are trying to do is, see, they are writing the three expressions. First one is vars of input file dot text dot length greater than 0. They are checking if the file content is empty or not. Okay, if the file is empty, then it will throw an error message. If they're not, then it will come here. Here they are writing this one, da.size greater than 1. So now we are receiving a file, and how many files we have received? One greater than 1. If 1 greater than 1, then it will set to false, else it will set to true. In our condition 1 greater than 1, it is a false statement. Then the result would be true, and then it comes to the next statement. da.size less than or equal less than 1. But in our case, we are receiving an input file 1 less than 1. It is a false statement. As it is a false statement, the final result will be true. But if you see here, do we really need these two statements here? Do we really need these statements?
Our example.
Not only in our example, here also. Here we have a statement which reads the input file. Okay, and here we are checking if that variable text is there or not. If there is any error in reading the file, then exception will be thrown at this point. If the file is received with the given name, then it will come here, and here we just have to check if the file content is empty or not. If da.size is less than 1, the exception would have already thrown here. So no need to add this statement. But why I was trying to add this is to give this explanation how this evaluate expression works. What it will do is it will try to execute these statements, these expressions, based on the final result. If the final result is true, then it will go to the next expression. If it is a false, then it will throw the error. Okay, so here what we are doing, we are reading the file and then validating the expression. And what I'm doing is I can remove this one. Yes, in addition, I'm adding an additional property called row count, which can be used for my later processing. So I'm going to add that here. I will use one second. I will use this property row count in processing the worker records. So as I need that property, I'm declaring here. I will use this property after splitting the document into individual records. Yes, tell me.
Like earlier you mentioned that like the worker ID is not there or termination date.
I'm coming to that.
Okay.
So here so far we are handling the scenario where the file is empty or file is not available. So first, if the file is not available, we are handling here. If the file is empty, we are handling that here. See, input file is empty and we are reading this same error message. Error occurred while reading the input file. and you can add this one. What is that? Context start, right? There's a problem with this. Error occurred while trying to read the input file. Input file is empty. I want to have this as the details also. And here, which message we are reading? Error occurred while reading the input file. So this enough message would be enough here. Okay, and here the file is empty, then it will throw input file is empty message. Now assume that the file is available and the file is not empty. Then the control will come here, and then the same message will be sent to the convert to XML, and this will try to convert that text into an XML file. Just assume while doing this conversion some exception occurred. While transforming from CSV to XML, some error occurred, runtime error. The input file has some special characters or ASCII characters, and this component could not able to decode those characters, and it throw an error. Then what happens? What happens? Yes, any case, some error occurred here, and here we don't have the exception handling for this component.
Will the integration fail?
Sorry?
Will the integration fail and start it?
Yes. So what happens is, so here the exception occurred and we didn't add the error handler to this component. We didn't add the error handler to this component. So what happens is, it will fail. Integration will fail, and by writing the error message, it will throw that big error message. Okay, so what you can do is you can also add the error handler here, send error. You can add this here, and you can add a put integration message saying that error occurred while transforming the or while processing the input file. You can write an error message. Okay, assume that we have added the error handler here. Okay, fine. Now go here, splitter. Just assume that we cannot split. There is some exception, or the XPath which we write is invalid. The XPath which we write to split the worker record, this is invalid, and it is causing some error. So then what happens? Again, integration will throw the error. And how can I handle that? So first select this one. You cannot add the error handler to this splitter or other components. You can add only to the mediation message. You cannot add the error handler here, but the error or exception occurred here. Again, integration will fail. Okay, but the how it will process means what happens is, assume that there is an exception occurred here, then the exception will be sent back to the previous component. The exception flows from this component to the previous component. Here exception occurred, we don't have the error handler here, then it will come here. It will check, do we have any error handler here? Assume that yes. Assume that yes. Then that exception, the exception which is thrown by this component will be handled here. Okay.
It has by default, it will go to the
Previous component. Okay. And
Yes, that
so assume that here we don't have the error handler. Then what happens is when the exception occurs, it will send back to this previous component, and if we don't have any error handler here, then we will come back to this. So here we have the error handler. Okay, though we have the error handler here, by default the exceptions occurred or raised within this component will be handled by this send error. By default it will handle the errors which are generated or thrown by this components which are inside this async mediation. It cannot handle the downstream errors. We call such things as downstream errors, means the which are raised by the next components. By default it will not handle the downstream errors. If you want to handle, then go and set this one, handle downstream errors to true. Handle downstream errors to true. If you do this, what happens is, okay, let's say assume we got an exception here, then it will send back to this. Here we don't have the exception handler, then it will come here. We don't have the async mediation with property set to handle downstream error, property set to true. So it will handle that exception and it will catch that exception, write the put integration message. Whatever it receives, it will error occurred while trying to read the input file. You will receive that. You will receive a message, error occurred while trying to read the input file. And whatever the message it receives, it will be logged with the help of context.error message. Okay, so remember, by default it cannot handle the downstream errors. You have to set this property, handle downstream errors, to true. Okay, remember this. And sometimes, see, though you handle all the exceptions, so assume that you handle all the, you have added the error handlers or you set the downstream errors to true, all this. Okay, though you said all this, there are, sometimes there may be some runtime errors which cannot be handled by this, by the integration, or you may miss to add the error handler to each and every component, and you may forget to put the handle downstream errors to true. So in that case, we can add an global error handler. We can add an global error handler. As the name indicates, global error handler, it will handle all the exceptions. It will handle all the exceptions which are not handled by these existing mediation components. Okay, it will handle all the errors which are not handled by the other error handlers. So how can we add the global error handler? To which component I have to add? Any guess? To which component I should attach the global error handler? You don't have to attach to any component. Okay, the how you can add the global error handler is just click somewhere in the, one second, just click somewhere in the assembly diagram, and here you can directly place the, see, where it is, error handler. Okay, you can directly place the error handler where it is. Yes, you can directly place the send error here. Don't attach this component to any other component, directly place inside the assembly diagram then this will be considered as global error handler. Global error handler. And what it will do is it will handle all the errors which are not handled by the other components in the integration. And the general practice is when we use the global error handler, we use put integration message. We use put integration message, and we attach this to the put integration message, and we write a critical error. We set the severity to critical error. Critical. This is the general practice, critical. And here whatever the error message you receive, you will add the context dot error message. See, exception, you can use this. This is a general practice. When you build the integration, all the integrations we add the global error handler, and that global error handler will send the error to the control to the put integration message, and here we write a critical error message. This is the general practice. Okay, and to handle the exceptions at the mediation level, we add the send error or log error to the mediation components. Okay, and async means async mediation or sync mediation. And we also set the handle downstream errors if you want integration to handle the downstream errors. With this, all the errors handler, input file is not received or empty file is means empty file, those errors will be handled. Okay, now assume that we have received the input file and the input file is not empty, but input file has the invalid data. Input file has the invalid data. So how to handle that? So now when there is no exception occurred here, this csv2.xml csv2xml, it will transform the data and it will split the record by record. It will get the first record. After getting the first record, we are reading that record details. See, we are reading the record details: employee ID, termination date, and primary termination reason and secondary termination reason. We are reading these properties. After reading these properties, what I want to do is, see, these four values are mandatory to terminate a worker. These four are mandatory to terminate a worker. So if any one of these value is missing in that record, then I want to throw an error message. I want to throw an exception. So how can we validate that? How can we validate that? So for that, I am writing this expression. So to prepare the error message, which contains these details, whether employee ID is missing, termination date is missing, or both are missing, okay, I'm writing some additional logic here. I'm declaring a property with name error, and whatever the message I want to write, like which data is missing, I want to add to this property. And here, if any one of these value is null, either employee ID is null or termination date, if any one of these is null, then what I want to do is I want to write this message, add this information to the error message. See, particular row has invalid data. whenever there is some mismatch or missing information, so whenever there is a missing information, I want to write that message to the integration event. So what I'm doing is, if any one of these properties are null, if any one of these are null, then what I'm doing is I'm writing this message. See, I'm setting the error message to the error message. Initially it will be blank, and then row count. I need the row count also, so that I can say, hey, first row has invalid data, second row has invalid data, third row has invalid data. And how can I get the row count? So when splitter is splitting the document, okay, the first record will be the first. When it is splitting the record, when it returns the first result, that is going to be the first record. When it is returning the second result, that is going to be the second record. So based on that logic, what I have done is, here I am declaring a property name row count with value 0. So initially the row count property value will be 0. Whenever I split the document, see here I am increasing that row count value to 1. Earlier the value is 0. Now when the splitter splits the first record, then it will increase the row count to 1. So now the value of this property is 1. And whenever there is an error, means if any one of this value is blank, then it will prepare an error message like this: first row has invalid data. And which invalid data that you are preparing in the next. Here, if properties of employee equal to null, then we are writing this error message: properties of error equal to properties of error plus employee is missing. By this statement, the properties of error, it already contains this information, so it will be like this: first row has invalid data, and that invalid message information employee is missing. If worker's last name is missing, sorry, termination data is missing, then it will add this message: primary termination reason same. So by end of this statement, it will collect all the missing data. It will collect all the missing data, and it will place that information inside this property. So at end of this component, I will have all the missing data information. Now here what I want to do is, after collecting all this information, if there is any missing data for that record, I want to throw an error. If there is any missing information, I want to throw an error. So how can I throw an error? Again, using validate expression. So which validation expression I have to validate? So we are writing all the error messages or that validation messages in this property, right? In the property props of error. Here we are writing in this property, we are writing all these validation messages. If worker record has all the valid data, then these statements will not change this property value. For a valid record, this property value will be blank. For a invalid record, some of this text will be added. So what I'm doing is, I'm writing this validation here: props of error equal to empty. What it will do is, empty, or you can use this one. What it will do is, it will check, is the property with the name error, is the property with the name error value is empty. If it is empty, see, then that means true. If it is empty, then it will go to the next component. If it is not empty, then it will write the error message. And which message I want to write? I want to write a message like this so and so row has the invalid data, employee is missing, termination date is missing, and primary termination reason is missing. That's right, this is the error message. And here I will check if the value is empty or not. If any worker has the invalid data, then it will throw an exception. And when it throw an exception, what I want to do is I don't want to terminate the execution, and I don't want to write an error message. I want to write a warning message saying, see, so and so worker record has the invalid data. So we are setting severity warning and summary and all these details to the error. So what happens is whenever there is an error, invalid data for a worker record, then it will be logged. And again, it will go back to the splitter. It will get the second record. If the second record also has invalid data, then it will log the error warning message to that second record. If any worker record has the valid data, then the control will be sent to the, see, if the worker has invalid data, then I want to execute or I want to terminate that worker in data. So that's why the termination we are handling here. Yes, I will add this code in tomorrow's session. Tomorrow we are going to discuss about how to call the web services from the Studio integration. So at that time I will implement the code. Just now I have added the sample code. I am using the local in and local out components which we discussed earlier. So within the integration I'm using local in and local out. So here local out and local in. Because instead of having all the code at once, I wanted to split the code. I want to split the code which do the terminations. So for that I have used the terminate employee local in component, and here I'm just adding the properties. See, whatever the message you received, I'm reading the employee ID, termination date, primary termination reason and secondary termination reason of the worker. I'm just reading these values. In tomorrow's session we will extend this and we will add a web service example, how to call a web service by passing these values. So how the integration works is, it will process the input data, split the data record by record. If the record has any invalid data, then it will add a warning message. If the record is valid, means if it contains all the required data, then it will go and call the terminate employee local in component which do the actual termination. Okay, when you call this one, this will actually do the termination. It will terminate all the valid records and write the warning messages to the records which are not valid. It will write the warning messages to the invalid records and it will terminate the valid records. So generally we call this approach as granular error handling. So the input file contains 20 or 30 records. So we are handling the errors at the each record level. We are not terminating the integration due to some mismatch or invalid data for a particular worker. Okay, the general approach is write the error message for such records. If the record is proper, then process it. Okay, this is a general approach. And sometimes just assume that your requirement is you want to execute the integration. If any error occurred, then you want to stop the termination. The same. Now you are processing the worker records. The input file has 20 records. If any one of these worker record has invalid data, then you want to terminate the whole integration. You don't want to process the other records. So generally we don't go for such integrations. Okay, generally we don't go for such integration, but if you have such requirement, what you can do is, see, in async mediation, how we have handled downstream errors. We have this option, continue after error. Okay, if you use the recover, read this one. If you read the second line, start from the first line, from the update onwards, the continue after error mediation property defaults to rewind, which means that the assembly runtime uses error handler to interpret the current flow. It executes the error handler to clear the error and then allows processing to continue. That means by setting the property to rewind, when there is an exception, the exception will be catched by the error handler and it will allow you to execute some code, and after that it will mark the exception as handled. It will mark that exception as handled, means it will clear all the error messages and etc. The error will be set as handled. But if you select the recover, then what happens is, when there is an exception, send error will catch that exception, it allow you to execute the code. After that, what happens is, it will throw that exception again. It will throw the exception. Let's say we got some exception here. Okay, we got some exception here, so then it will be sent here. Assume that we have downstream errors to true, just assume. So then what happens is, whenever there is an exception here, it will be sent here, and we have the downstream errors equal to true. So this exception will be handled by this component. So it will send error will catch this exception and write the error message. And after that, we set this property to recover. As we set this property to recover, the exception will be thrown again. After executing this code, it will throw the exception again. Then it will come here, and we don't have error handler. Come here, we don't have error handler. Come here, we have downstream errors to true. So that exception will be handled here again. Here also, if you have recovered, then it will send back to this component. It will send back to this one, and here we have the error handler. Though we have the error handler, we don't have this property, handle downstream error set to true. So it cannot handle that exception or error. It will be sent to the workday in, and it cannot handle, so exception will be thrown. Okay, so this makes the difference, the recover or rewind. But mostly 99% we don't go for such integrations, and few might have the requirement. Okay, but generally we always go for granular level error handling. We call such errors as, such examples as all or nothing. This is a granular error handler. The second type is all or nothing, as the name indicates. So if you want to process all the records or no records. Okay, in interviews they will ask, hey, which properties we set in mediation related to error handler. One is handle downstream errors and continue after error, these two. Now let me, not this one, where is our integration? Redeploy this integration. We will try to debug this now. See, Guys, whatever we discussed here, this property and all those, this logic which is specific to our application. See, really, it's general, if it is for others who are mainly from the technical background, we don't explain all this. This is not related to exception handling. This logic is specific to our application. So what you should consider is, first remember these points. Okay, we can handle the exceptions in Workday, and we have two components, log error and send error. Log error will simply allow us to log the error message to the server log file. Okay, it will not change the integration status when there is an exception. Send error allow you to execute some set of code when there is an exception. Okay, next we can add the error handlers at the mediation component level or global level. If you add any error handler to the mediation component, by default it will handle the errors that are thrown by the components which are inside it. If you want integration, this async mediation or mediation to handle the errors that are raised by the downstream errors, then set the property handle downstream errors to true. By default it is a false, so set the downstream errors to true. When you do this, this component can handle the errors thrown by the downstream components. And whenever there is an exception, by default it will be handled by the error handler. The error handler component will catch that and it will handle that exception. Means by default it will be marked as handle. And if you want to rethrow that exception after catching and handling, if you want to rethrow it again, you can use continue after error. You'll use this one. If you want to throw the exceptions, custom exceptions like employee ID is missing, this is not a inbuilt exception, right? This is our exception according to our application. If the employee ID is null, I want to throw an exception. So if you want to validate or write such validations, you can use validate expression. Okay, it allows you to write set of expressions. If any one of this expression is false, it will throw an error message. And we also have the global error handler. If you want to add the global error handler, just drag log error or send error to the assembly diagram. You don't have to don't attach to any component. Okay, the general practice is, as part of global error handler, we use the send error component, and we send the control to the put integration message, which writes the critical error when there is an exception. Okay, now let me redeploy. See here what we are doing, whenever there is an exception, or especially whenever there is a missing data, we are writing a message. We are going to write a message to the integration event. So wait for a second, let me log into the tenant.
Raj?
Yes, I'm there. I'm just configuring the retrieval service. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to debug the studio integration. Let me add the breakpoints. I have added already here. Yes, let's take global error handler also. Okay, so just let me quickly check if I set these properties properly. So I have selected handle downstream true and rewind. Okay, so here also true and rewind, no problem. True and rewind, because I want to check this option. If you use this one, integration will throw the exception and it will fail again. Okay, now I'm going to debug this integration. Yes, debug the integration. Whenever you initiate the debugging, so then somebody who has the integration administrator access should attach an input file. So I'm going to see this user has the integration administrator access. So we are adding termination data. Now the file is, I'm not going to change anything. This is the overall integration process. Let me go to the debug mode. Hmm. Switch to the debug mode. Yes. So currently we are here. This step will read the input file. So let me execute this. Yes. So it read the input file. Okay. So and we are doing the validation. So which validation we have here? Show properties. So we have this one, input dot length greater than 0. If it is less than 0, then it will throw an error saying input file is empty. So now let me see, there is no error. Now we are going to copy that file content into mediation message. See, this is our input file data. The first record is proper, last record is proper. In between we have, see, second row is missing employee ID, third row is missing termination, what is that, primary termination reason. This record is missing secondary termination reason. This is missing both termination date and secondary termination reason. So let's see whether integration will handle that. So currently it transformed into XML now. So what happens? We don't have a add breakpoints here. Why it directly went to C. This is the first termination record. Now go to this. Okay. So we are getting this termination record. Yes. The second record has missing employee ID. We see this employee ID is missing. Now it will come here. It is going to the put integration message. Let me add a breakpoint here. I think I have missed this. Okay. currently we are here because the worker employee ID is missing. So if you go to the properties and see the error message, all the error information we are writing to a property called error. Can you read this one? Second row has invalid data, employee ID is missing. We are writing this message to the integration event. So if you see here, for this worker only employee ID is missing, so it is going to add the warning message. Now we are coming here, third component, and it is getting the third record. The third record, primary termination reason is missing. Okay, so now come here, see termination reason, and here we are doing the check, coming to put integration message because primary termination reason is missing. Go to the properties and see the error. Third row has invalid data. Yes, please give me a second. So here third record has this invalid data. Now we're going to the next record, fourth record. Here fourth record contains this information. 2, see secondary termination reason is missing. So if we go to the property, see secondary termination is missing. Now we validate, it will set this. See fifth row has invalid data, the termination date is missing and secondary termination reason is missing. So now last record, so it has the valid data. You see it has the valid data. As it is a valid data, then it will obviously call this terminate employee. So let me add the breakpoints again. To add or remove the breakpoints, use the same. Okay, now where is the control? See here, it will check the validate expression and all the records are proper. So as this worker data is valid, or it is as expected, it is going to call the terminate employee. Whenever there is an invalid data, that it is throwing an error, and that error information is logged to the, is added to the mediation message. And the last worker record has the valid data, so it is going to call the terminate employee. See, tomorrow we will replace this with the actual terminate employee web service logic, but for time being we have added a log message. So we have added this, and aggregator as all the records are over, splitter and integration execution will be over. Now the integration will complete it with warnings, because we have added the warning message to the integration failures. So go to the integration event, complete it with the warnings. If we go here, you will see the warning message, second row, third, fourth, fifth. First row and sixth row, they have the valid data, so it's not showing any warning messages. So when somebody see this one, okay, they will understand this row has the missing ID, missing information, and they will review the input file. Okay, this is how you can handle the exceptions in Workday. Exceptions are errors in Workday. Yes. Any queries? See, in my requirement, what I want to do is whenever there is some invalid data, I want to create an mediation message. So I'm using put integration message, I'm adding that here. And few people, what they do is, instead of writing one integration separate integration message, what they do is they will create an exception file, or what is that, error file. Whenever they are executing the integration, instead of creating the individual error messages, or though they create the error messages, what they do is they sometimes they may want to create an summary file, a file which contains each individual row records. Okay, second row has invalid data, third one has and reason. So how we have the individual messages here, they may want to create a file with all these details, so that if the file is coming from the vendor, we can send that file to the vendor and along with the input file, saying that hey, this is the input file we have received and these are the errors or warnings generated by our integration, so could you please validate the input data. If they want to do that, simple, what they will do is instead of simply adding the put integration message, what they will do is they will add all the messages to another property. We will create a property called error summary, and every time when there is an error message, we will add that error message to the that property, error summary property, and finally we save the data of that property as a file using store component. So we already discussed how to use the store component to save a file, and here we have seen how to add the content to the property, same property again and again. See, here we are checking if this is empty, then add the here. If the employee ID is empty, then add the this information to the existing error message. So how we are adding the all the messages to the error for each worker. Okay, when there is an error, add this content, properties of error content, into the properties of error summary, and at the end of this execution, this error summary property will have all the error information and save it as a file. Okay, so let me check if I miss anything here. Yes, error handler, and as I said, we have few validation components using which you can throw in errors. One is validate expression, see, which we have used. Validate expression, it allows you to write the validations. If any of this validation returns false, then it will throw an exception. And sometimes we don't just validate the expression, sometimes you want to validate the XML file. You are receiving an input XML file and you want to check if it is as per the XSD. Is the XML file is as per the schema document? Then we have another validation component, validate XML. One second. See, validate XML. What it will do is it will check if the XML is as per the given schema, and validate expression, which we discussed, and validate XPath. So it will try to apply an XPath on a mediation message and checks whether it is returning any data or not. If it is returning any data, then it will continue. If it not written any data, then it will throw an error message. That is another. But generally we don't use this. Mostly we go for ML validations. If you want to validate XML, you can use this. And send error or log error, you can add it to the mediation error handler, global error handler. And if you want to catch the exceptions, just add the error handler component, either send error or log error, to your mediation message, and write that error message to the integration event with the help of put integration message component. And when you are adding the messages, you can get the exception, current exception information with the help of context dot exception. Where it is, with the help of context dot exception. Here we are writing some other. Is it same? Oh, it is. Somewhere we have added. Yes. You can get the current exception using with the help of context dot error message or error code. So it will return the error code or error component, in which component the exception occurred, or error message. If you want to get the all these details, you can use exception. It will contain all the information. Okay, so as I said, handle downstream errors, continue after error, rewind or recover, and global error handler. The general practice is use critical and use the put integration message with the critical. So faults we will discuss in tomorrow's session, this section, and the same, how you can get the error message information, message severity, and see, these are the different severity levels that we can set. See how the final integration status, the final integration status, completion status will depend on the mediation messages. Sorry, I'm sorry, not mediation message, integration messages. See how the integration will set the final status is, currently how many messages we have? 4. So 4 messages. And what is the severity of those messages? Warning. So how the integration will do is, if all the messages are with this severity info, if all the integration messages are with the severity info, then the final status will be completed. If any one of this message severity is a warning, then the final status would be completed with the warnings. Okay, let's say we have 2 messages, one is info and another one is warning. So at that time, what would be the final status? We have 2 integration messages, one is severity is info and another one is warning. Then what would be the final status? Yes,
Completed with warnings.
it's warnings, because warning has the priority. Then information, if any warning, then that should be logged. So then final status would be completed with warnings and error. So if you have any error message, then the final status would be completed with errors. The same concept. If you have one info, one warning and another error message, error has the priority. So the final status would be completed with errors. The integration final status would be completed with errors, and here you can see information message, warning and error message. And if any critical message, then status would be failed. So as I mentioned, all or nothing. So if you use recover option, then rethrow error true. In this send error, we have rethrow error. So what it will do is, as I mentioned here, the mediation message I mentioned, see, in the advanced, we have the continue after error, rewind or recover, right? So along with this, whenever this error component, guys, I think I have explained wrongly. So whenever there is an error here, this component will handle the exception and allow you to execute this code. And after that, if you want to rethrow an error, we have this rethrow error true, rethrow error true. This what you have to set. I'm sorry. This is what you have to set, and after that anyway we have this recover or rewind. So if you want to know more about the error handlers, okay, and if you want to see how to handle the errors, you can import the workday sample. There is a workday sample error handling. Okay, import that example and see how they are handling the exceptions there. If you have any queries, we can discuss in our next session. Yes, any queries on the exception handling? If not, I will stop the recording. Okay.